processing all the various claims
and where
that
do
are
you
here
put them in the
already.
meantime?
Well, again, as I just said, there is no good solution to this.
Well, come up with one that isn't good then, because you haven't come up with a single one so far.
My question is, should the Rwanda policy be dropped, and where would the panel house refugees already in the country?
Anita, let's start with you.
I don't think it should be dropped. I think that at this point, who knows whether and when there will be permission for it to proceed. Because I do think that you need to have a system. We all want a system that allows refugees to come to this country when they're needed. But we all straightforwardly know that we cannot house absolutely every single person who would quite like to or prefer to base themselves in the UK for even as they're fleeing war-torn countries, just because infrastructurally we just do not have the capacity to do that. So we have to have a system of deciding who can come and who can't, and that's going to necessarily be a bit messy and be a bit arbitrary. And so when you've got a system like that, what really, really matters is that you have some way of making those kinds of decisions. And what we're seeing from the small boats in particular is a massive shift, a fundamental shift in the ways in which all of Europe has been impacted by the volumes of people coming over. And no country has got this right. Like, you look at Italy, you look at Germany, France.
No excuse for us to get it wrong, though.
No, but my point is that it's complicated, and no country has managed to successfully attack the problem as it exists right now, which is that it is breaking asylum systems as they exist. And so you have to explore options that are not the usual, because I think there has been a fundamental shift in the kinds of volumes that we're seeing.
But surely...
And it's really destroying lives, just to say, particularly because of the exploitation that we are seeing of people who are incredibly vulnerable.
The only point of the policy, though, surely is to deter people from coming in the first place. But if only a couple of hundred people are ever going to be sent to Rwanda each year, that's not exactly a great deterrent, is it?
Yeah, I think that the point about whether this is going to be effective is something that absolutely needs to be proven. But I don't think there's a reason just not to explore it at all, to see if it actually does help break this system. Because fundamentally, if you end up in a situation where the likelihood of these traffickers getting the money they want is significantly impacted by the fact that actually they can't successfully locate themselves in the UK, that could break the system. I think actually the thing that matters more than this, and I slightly get frustrated that Rwanda is a bit of a distraction from the fundamental issue of returning, because you have to get to a system where if someone has an asylum claim that is declined, there is a way to remove them from the country, and that requires agreement with those countries. We've seen this with Albania, where a deal went in, and then the numbers of Albanians coming into the country via small boats dramatically changed. And I think that is the focus, and that is what's going to deliver results. I slightly feel that Rwanda is a distraction, but there's no reason not to explore that as an option.
Daisy Cooper.
Yes, I do think that the Rwanda scheme should be scrapped. I think it is immoral. I think it is unworkable, and I think it is incredibly expensive for the taxpayer. What Liberal Democrats have said time and time again is that instead we would prefer to see safe and legal routes established, so that people who are genuinely fleeing war and persecution have a way of getting to their country to make their claim in a safe way, and that the money that you would save from scrapping the Rwanda scheme should be spent on processing the thousands and thousands and thousands of claims that are now ticking up at the Home Office. And through doing that, you would make sure that people who desperately need help can access it, they can start their lives here, they can get jobs, they can start to pay tax, and those people who don't have a legitimate claim can be deported swiftly. And that's a solution that we've put to the government, and sadly they've just ignored it.
Why have you ignored it, Richard Holden?
Well, I think, first of all, I just take Daisy's point there head on. I don't think it's immoral at all to send people to another safe country. I mean, they're fleeing from a safe country, i.e. France or Belgium in the first place. And I'd just like to, just drill down a little bit into what Daisy was saying there. We've got two sorts of people crossing, coming into the country at the moment. We've got a huge number of economic migrants, and we've also got genuine refugees. We've had schemes for genuine refugees from Ukraine, from Syria, from Afghanistan, and elsewhere. and particularly Hong Kong as well. Over 100,000 people arriving from Hong Kong too over the last couple of years. Those are clear, safe and legal routes. As you mentioned with the Albanian situation, we've seen huge numbers of people deciding to come to the UK, even though they're already either in a safe country and can claim refugee status there, or have no issue at all and are trying to basically bypass the normal system where normal economic migrants have to go through to get to the UK. And I think it's basic fairness actually for people, that what they want to see is that people who want to be an economic migrant to the UK have to go to the same system as everybody else. And I don't understand why there's been such a pushback on that. The real expense in this system is the fact that people have been coming across in huge numbers in recent years, and we've had to try and house them as we see an exponential almost increase in the numbers coming, and we have to have some deterrence there. And one of those sensible deterrents, I think, is Rwanda policy. The other is what.
But it's not a deterrent, as I just explained. If you're only sending 200 people there, people have a sort of. I don't know, 1 in 10 or 1 in 20 chance of avoiding it.
And the other is what Anita said, which is actually the bigger picture as well, which is for many of them from safe countries coming. For example, the third of people who came last year, the third of all of the migrants who came across the Channel were from Albania, a safe country, a NATO ally, and we need to get them deported as swiftly as possible. And I'm glad that return agreements are there.
If Rwanda is such a safe country, why do we accept asylum seekers from Rwanda?
I think the truth is, when it looks to, you look at Rwanda and the system at the moment, well, you could say the same with Albania until relatively recently as well. I think it's a matter of getting agreements in place and certain legislation passed. But nobody's arguing that Albania is not a safe country, and I don't think realistically anybody's actually today arguing that Rwanda isn't a safe country either. I think what we need to do is have a system which basically stops the boats, because the truth is that people are dying in the Channel trying to get here from other safe countries. If we can stop the boats and give people confidence in our system again, I think people are happy to see sensible economic migration policy. Over the last few years, that's what we've tried to move to, not the open door policy we had when we were members of the European Union, and also those routes for genuine refugees. I've got Syrian people who've been resettled in my own constituency, Ukrainians and Hong Kongers too. And I think people are happy to see those routes. What they don't want to see is that you get here and you can stay here if you manage to make it all the way. The British government had a really sensible policy with Syria, which is to take the most vulnerable from refugee camps. And I think that's exactly what we should be doing, going out to help those most in need around the world, not those who've got the ability to make their way here.
So my answer is yes, of course it should be scrapped, as should the idea that we're looking at barges and cruise ships and
why should that be scrapped?
Well, I just think it's just, it's like a headline looking for a policy, really. We're talking about very small numbers, 2,000 or 3,000, whereas actually I think we're looking at more like 45,000, 50,000 needed. So, and already there's been, it started to crumble today, mainly because of Conservative MPs who are saying this, it's not good governance, it's too expensive, it won't happen, all of those sort of things. But
So you're happy for the taxpayer to pay £7 million a day?
Well, no, because I think that's completely unsustainable. And
okay, well, so what's your alternative?
No, absolutely. So I think what we have to do is start running this system properly so we speed up. One question I can't answer is why the backlogs are so huge. It's taking so long for people to go through this system. And I spent time when there was the Calais camps a few years ago. The only way that moved was when there were proper partnerships with France that could actually make it work on proper safe routes that would enable people
You've dodged my question. If you don't want people to be put up in hotels, if you don't want them to be put up in RAF bases or on barges or on ferries, where do you want them to be put up?
Well, I suppose there has to be somewhere where people go in the short term, and I don't want them to be in hotels because I know this is
what's wrong with barges or military camps then?
Well, it's your colleagues that are talking about it.
I think there's individual constituency MPs will obviously raise concerns about local issues, but generally on the policy, I just don't think it's
sustainable because you're talking about 3,000 places and we've got 45,000.
You'll have more than that, but what's your issue with barges and hotels?
Well, it would be hordes of people. Hordes of barges that we're talking about. I just don't think it's workable.
If it's cheaper than hotels, what's wrong with that?
Because I think the actual emphasis needs to be on a policy that works. and a policy that works for the long term.
So look, that's all warm words, but what we need
not
to,
really. I think the barges are taking up an awful lot of warm words, whereas actually we should be focusing on.
We have 400 hotels at the moment across this country. I don't know if they're anywhere you live, but there are in constituencies across the country.
I understand that.
Well, where would you put these people?
But I wouldn't have got. Well, if
you wouldn't have got here. Okay.
No. All right. Let me go to the kids that are in the hotels as well, because there's been horror stories of kids that have gone missing from Brighton. 200 kids at a time put into
you don't want them in hotels. So let's put them somewhere secure.
So you move them quickly to the places where they've got long-term places to be. For children, that's because local authorities have a duty to be able to look after them.
We all know.
So don't put them into hotels in the first place. And actually, if they go missing, can you notice?
So where would you put them?
Well, there's a statutory duty for local authorities to actually look after children.
But everybody. So you just disperse them across the country, wherever, i.e. in the hotels, which is exactly the problem.
No, not in the hotels at all. They have a duty to look after them through their care system.
Let's take the pressure off Anne for a second, because neither of you actually...
You can't put tens of thousands of people through it.
Neither of you said where you would put them either.
Well, as I said, if you scrap the Rwanda scheme, you could use that money to actually invest in the processing of all these various claims.
No, you're not answering my question. If you don't want them in hotels, if you don't want them in barges, if you don't want them at RAF bases, where would you put them?
So
we're dealing with the problem as it is now, not how you would like it to be.
The problem that the Conservatives have made is simply that there are no good answers on this, and it's for the government to bring forward solutions. But I think
it's also for you too. If you want people to vote for you, they want to know what you think.
Well, as I say, if people want to vote for the Liberal Democrats, they're going to be voting for a policy where we would scrap the Rwanda scheme and we would spend that money on processing all the various claims.
And where do you put them in the meantime?
Well, again, as I just said, there is no good solution to this.
We'll come up with one that isn't good then, because you haven't come up with a single one so far.
Well, it's for the government to bring this forward, because it's
that is abdicating responsibility. How you can sit there as somebody who presumably aspires to be in government at some time and not say what you would do if you were in that position.
I have literally just told you what I would do.
No, you haven't. You can't just say, I wouldn't have started from here.
That isn't what I said. What I said was, given the situation that we have today, we would scrap the scheme the Conservatives have come up with, which is sending people to be processed in Rwanda, which we know isn't going to work.
And the 40,000 people who are in hotels at the moment, you'd leave them there?
Well, you would invest in processing the claims. Now, there might be other suggestions.
You can't just bring in 10,000 new people to process the claims overnight, can you?
I'm not in the government. I don't have the civil service giving me suggestions of all the different places that people could go. What I'm saying is we would scrap this particular scheme. We would spend the money on processing the claims of people who have already got a claim in place to speed that up. We have to have safe.
You don't think the government are trying to do that?
No, I don't think they're doing it. They're spending all this money. They're spending all this money on the Rwanda scheme, and that is money that could be spent on speeding up the processing.
Anita?
I think...
Neither does the government. Come on.
We've just come up with it.
No, Anita.
I mean,
so have all of your
backbenchers. Really,
I just think that grown-up politics requires us engaging in the situation.
Last night's panel was troublesome.
Saying, "Well, I wouldn't have started here," and I think that is not what we need from politicians right now, because
Literally
we all accept it's complicated. But
actually, not what I said.
Okay. On the question, I think that the reality of the situation is that we can't house them anywhere else, and it becomes a nightmarish logistical problem. But actually, one of the things that Robert Jenrick also announced today, which I'm not sure was covered as much, was money invested in the Afghan settlement scheme to get more long-term housing, basically for people that had been here 18 months. And it would appeal to for children as well, because obviously schooling is a big thing that's massively impacted, and also more money for local authorities that are dealing with this. So I think you've got to have a twin track of this. By the way, on these barges, I mean, the Netherlands have done this and done it fairly successfully, had 1,500 people in these
they probably have a lot more barges than we do.